everyone. Welcome to Raising Vibrations. You're with Simon today. Today's video, we're going to be looking at the full moon in Aries. And this is for the 1st of October, 2020. And I hope that everybody is fairly okay during this time. As always, we're processing through some really intense stuff with Pluto and Saturn and good old Jupiter all in Capricorn over there. And so wherever you are today in the world, wherever you are within your personal space, at least try to do one thing for yourself today that's just really for you. Okay, kind of already a snippet into the full moon in Aries energy. Okay, so just want to do two quick announcements. Firstly, myself and Jen, we run a reading package where what we do is you have one session with myself, which is an astrology conversation, and then we do another, or you do another conversation with Jen that is on human design. And what this does is it kind of combines not only the ability to understand how to make decisions for yourself in the moment and understand how your conditioning works, human design, and what is the emotional journey of the soul, right? Evolutionary astrology. So we've got that on our website, and I can put that in the description below. And that's a really great way to get this 360-degree panoramic view of, the nature of the soul and the nature of your human design profile. So highly recommend that if you really want to dive into a really intense inquiry into the self. Okay. And then, like I was describing in a couple of videos before, the Astrology Immersion program. And what that does is it's 12 videos. They're roughly about 40 minutes long. And it is me taking you from the intellectual structure of what an archetype is, so Aries, and we go all the way from the intellect straight into the emotional body. And the value or benefit for doing something like that or having those videos available is you take your astrology chart, you look at a transit that you're dealing with, or a solar return or a progression, and you look at, say, Venus in your 4th house. And what you'll do is you'll listen to the Venus archetype or the Taurus archetype, and you'll listen to the 4th house archetype. And the combination of those two videos will allow you to emotionally bond/connect with the experience of having that transit in your life. And through in that sense, you really get to emotionally digest and take in the intention for why you would have a transit like that. So it kind of really connects you with the individual experience of your chart. And if you do that for, say, 6 months, you'll actually get a really strong sense of the story that is in your chart, right? And you're getting to learn about your nature of your soul's journey independently of somebody telling you what it is. Okay. So those two things, and I'll put them in the description and the link in the comments below. Okay. All right. So full moon in Aries. And I'm sure that you've been listening to other astrologers talk about how intense October is going to be. And yes, that is true. It is going to be a month filled with a lot of things happening. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with talking about it from the kind of collective perspective, and then I want to jump into speaking from what you can do individually in your own life that is the potential, like the evolutionary potential for healing with the symbolism. Okay. So let's start off firstly with looking at the Mars-Pluto aspect. So Pluto is sitting at 22 degrees over there, and Mars sitting at 24 degrees retrograde, right? Mars retrograde, Pluto retrograde. Now, Pluto will actually go direct on the 4th of October, and that's really significant. The reason why it's significant is because whenever Mars and Pluto form an aspect to each other, like a square or a conjunction or an opposition, you're definitely going to experience a lot of emotional transformation. Well, that is least the potential. The side effect of having Pluto square Mars is a lot of raw, uncomfortable, very intense, very unprocessed emotions surfacing in your reality. And it can show up as anger, it can show up as grief, it can show, well, it's always going to show up primarily as some form of anger. And then as you go deeper into the emotion, you'll start to see where the layers of disempowerment emotionally have been felt. So Mars Pluto square coming more into alignment, and because the moon is in Aries and it's conjunct Chiron, there is a very strong significance of this Pluto Mars square. Now, it's sitting in the background. Okay, so if you had to draw kind of a circle over here, you'd say like the new moon and the full moon energy is circusing over here, circusing. And the Pluto Mars aspect is circling around that. And this is kind of an energy that's in the backdrop, and we're all interfacing with it, and we might feel into it every single day, but it's not as sort of prominent in your face 24/7 unless you actually drop into that frequency. And that frequency feels like the awareness of, so if you're living in the UK, for instance, you're very aware of the divide that is taking place between people who feel deeply disempowered, that they're going into lockdown, and then the people who feel deeply disempowered and then are responding to that lockdown through a need to fight back, right? So resistance. And this is stemming from humanity's need to break out of the old structure and feeling really, really disempowered and almost put their backs against the wall. So the backdrop of this Mars-Pluto square is the awareness of many, many, many years, many, when I say many, I'm talking like, 300, 400, right? Where we have been living under a structure that is outdated, ultimately, particularly now, like it's outdated, right? We're looking for more Aquarius ways of living. So there's a lot of power that is unconscious power relative to authority showing up, and we're very sensitive to it, and we don't want that energy, right? Now, the thing is, though, Mars is retrograde. So what we're going to experience and feel is this: we don't know where to put that anger. We don't know where to put those strong emotions. And so that's kind of bubbling up within inside of ourselves. And in some ways, it's kind of showing up in a displaced way, right? So anything that gets suppressed will become, it will come out in distorted ways. So there's a conflict, there's a strong power conflict that is manifesting itself. And we're very, very aware of the internal conflict regarding our own upbringing, where we have had unresolved feelings of abandonment, betrayal, and loss related to the parent, and where we've had that related to world governments and authorities. So that material, that emotion is showing itself now on the surface, but it's becoming more highlighted with the moon in conjunction with Chiron. So this aspect, this Mars-Pluto aspect, is really, really revealing to us consistently all the time the relationship between power, relationship between control, and how we feel in relation to control. And it goes the other way as well for people who are in control, trying to add more control, trying to put more restrictions in place, trying to control things themselves. And a lot of it is, of course, stemming from an unconscious fear of losing control, right? And not knowing what to do. And I suspect that in the States as well, this is also something that's very apparent and clear at the moment. So a lot of social unrest coming from this aspect. Absolutely, 100%. As you know, Saturn, it will be direct by the time this new moon, full moon happens. And I encourage you to go check out the Saturn direct video that I've done. I'm sure many of you have already watched it. So this will compound, right? Saturn conjunction with Pluto squaring Mars over here just compounds the restriction, the feeling of limitation, the feeling of being stuck in one place. And a lot of these emotions are rising to the surface. So I encourage you to go onto Google, onto YouTube, and type in Jim Hollis. He is a Jungian psychologist, and he has done some extensive work on what is called the Saturn's Shadow, right? And it's particularly aimed at men, and it correlates to the structural reality that we've all participated in, right? So through women, you've experienced the repression of the patriarchal structure, in the sense that yeah, just experienced that, and the laws and regulations, and the absurdity. And then you look at men, for instance, or boys that have grown up in a society that advocates a completely different model of emotional maturity, right? So there's a kind of deficiency in some way that permeates into the collective at the moment. And that's what I'll talk about with the healing, the necessary healing of codependency. Absolutely, I'll talk about that a bit later. So Saturn now in relationship to Pluto, it's a new phase. So we're trying to define things here. We're trying to reorganize the way that the reality works, but we're very uncertain about it. We don't know what it is. We don't know how it works. We don't know how to move forward naturally, because it's a new phase energy. So we have to really, really be mindful of the fact that Pluto, Jupiter is in a closing phase cycle, right? Saturn is in a new phase cycle. And so we want to kind of move forward, but Mars retrograde is saying, no, 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 no. Do not move forward yet, because you still have to receive the insights of Jupiter's balsamic phase to Pluto, and then Jupiter's new phase to Pluto, as in Jupiter crossing Pluto. And then we can start implementing some sort of direction related to a new way of being. So there's a lot of tension between moving forwards, moving backwards, moving forwards, moving backwards. And it's like, no, do that. No, don't do that. So yes, do that. No, don't do that. And of course, it can be very nauseating, because there's so much energy contradicting each other within the context of the chart. And that brings us to the Libra, the sun in Libra. It's like, it's paradoxical. It's polarized. We have two sides of the spectrum, and both of those sides are, in their own perspective, seemingly right in their way. And ironically, both sides, within the context of their own direction, are pulling against each other, as opposed to not working towards each other. That's a whole entire complex social debate that I'm not going to get into or share thoughts on, because it's too nuanced and it's too complex, and I don't believe that we can actually remotely kind of break the ice around what it is that it means to move forward as a human race, right? I think there are pockets of information that the astrology chart holds us, and that's what I try to advocate in what I'm sharing with everybody. Like, for instance, with the Saturn work, begin to really start working on where you have displaced emotional memory related to childhood. Start reclaiming your power, start reclaiming your sense of self. This starts with dealing with your internalized patterns of abandonment, loss, and betrayal. Those would be big things. So these energies collectively, with that over there, creates a lot of confusion, and you'll see it. You'll see a lot of confusion, and you'll see with the moon and the sun in an opposition with each other in cardinal signs. So the cardinal is Capricorn, cardinal sign is Libra, and cardinal sign is Aries. We don't have any planets in the Cancer archetype, but it doesn't mean that aspect is not activated. It just simply means that this is a point of interest that we are seeking to integrate ourselves into. And I suppose I can go a little bit further here and say that if you could imagine for a moment that you could understand that, or see that there are planetary nodes. And so the planetary nodes of Pluto, Jupiter, and Saturn sit here like that. They sit across the Capricorn and Cancer axis, like so, 3 of them. And when you have the moon or the sun and the moon squaring this planetary node aspect, even though they're not there in the sense of the charts, we are going to have collective material show up for us. In other words, the planetary, the way that you need to try to grasp or conceptualize planetary nodes is like a record. Okay, the vinyls, and they've got these grooves in them, and so we all have a Cancer Capricorn axis collectively within our awareness, right? There's a groove that we all swim in, and when we have planets that activate or make squares, like for instance here or here or here, right, we're going to have cultural and collective stories show up for us that we get to share equally. We get to see them. That's why you'll see Australia, for instance, experiencing the Mars Pluto square. You'll see it in the States. You'll see it in the UK. You'll see it in all over the world. Right. That's why when COVID came along, there was a lot of activation on the Pisces axis, and that naturally squares the planetary nodes of Uranus. And Uranus sits in Taurus. Okay, as in the node, Uranus sits in Taurus, and that when it was activated over there, it brought to us the imprinting regarding our survival, what we're going to do, how we're going to survive, so on and so forth. That's not the narrative completely, but it's too much to go into. I'll talk about it in a different video. Okay, so collective memory coming to the surface regarding disempowerment, abuse of power, political corruption, unethical distribution of resources, fear of entrapment we all experience. And of course, the collective experience will show us this, and we'll see it. Don't buy into it. Do not buy into it. It's very difficult. It's very easy for me to say that because I'm not in an actual lockdown itself. So I appreciate that. But what I do want to encourage you to hear with this energy is that it's a planetary activation that is present right now. And so we're sensitive to it. But if you identify and internalize it as this is you, you're going to be part of it. And you have to detach to a certain degree and see that this material is moving over you like a transit. And so it's trying to create an internal shift within ourselves. That's the message here. We're going through an internal shift within ourselves. So we need to recognize that we are in kind of this box, and inside of this box, we are feeling limited, looking the way that we're looking. And we need to recognize that we need to start looking in a different direction. And it's the shift in perspective that allows for the liberation from the box, ultimately. And I think somebody asked me earlier, I think it was a couple of weeks ago or 2 weeks ago, about the energy in the format energy in human design, gate 3. We have Mars there, if I'm not mistaken. And eventually at the end of the year, you're going to have the 60 and the 3 activated completely in human design body graph. And that energy over there is a format energy, and it's a transmutation energy. And we will feel the limitation. Absolutely. There is a shift in perspective that needs to take place. And this energy here collectively is pushing the need to change your perspective, basically, your outlook. And the way that you change that is by turning inward and taking your attention away from the outside world and all its limitations and all its blockages, etc., and connect with you, connect with your inner space. Okay, so the Mars retrograde is forcing an inward self-evaluation, and it's not done because we can easily kind of internalize this as we feel victim to it, right? Whereas really the energy is it's not personal. It doesn't even have an interest regarding the human race in that sense. It's just the nature of life at this point in time and the kind of cosmic cycles that we're dealing with. So if we can depersonalize ourselves from it a bit and then start to use the potential of this evolutionary intention at the moment to shift your narrative within inside of yourself and begin to turn inward and find what it is that is freeing in you, as in your emotional blocks or the childhood trauma that you carry, or whatever it might be. That is the evolutionary potential held with this aspects, these squares here. Okay. All right. So let's talk a little bit more about on the personal level. All right. We've got Sun in Libra, and we've got Sun quincunxing Uranus. Now, the Taurus archetype and the Libra archetype make a natural quincunx. Okay, so here you have Uranus, and where is the Sun? So let's have a look. Sun at 9 degrees and Uranus at 9 degrees. There we go. There's the quincunx aspect. As you can see there it's represented by the green line. So what this energy says, or what this aspect says, is here we have an emotion, we have a relationship to ourselves, and then that's how we relate to people in a social sphere. Now, we have an internal relationship, and that's an external relationship. That in conjunct creates a natural crisis where when we're relating to somebody, we are generally hearing them through our Venus, right? Through our own Taurus aspect. We're not hearing them through their lens. So the archetype of Libra talks about listening. And so what we're doing is we're listening to the needs, and we're listening to the emotional dynamics that are for the other person when we're listening or we're paying attention. So it's coined as active listening. And if anybody that's watching this video that has material or knows about somebody or knows about a person that's doing great work around active listening or within that scope, please post it in the comments. I do know we have, I'm trying to think of it now, nonviolent communication is a way that shows itself up, where we recognize our unresolved needs within ourselves, and then we talk about how those needs can be met by another person through requests, etc. So this the Sun quincunx Uranus here is saying to us that we're going to experience where we felt like we've never been heard. We're going to experience where we are not feeling like we're being heard. And that in conjunct will create a crisis within yourself to ask yourself, where is it that you are externalizing your needs in any conversation? Again, this is about coming into yourself. This is about coming into meeting your own needs and understanding yourself independently from the other person. So that Sun quincunx Uranus will create sudden blind spot shocks or adjustments when you're having a conversation. Okay, not really actually listening to you. I'm listening to your ideology, as an example. I'm listening to your perspective and then wanting to correct that relative to my own biases. So the Mercury quincunxing the Aries over here is where we will experience the anxiety of separation. Okay, and the anxiety of separation manifests itself through feeling empowered in something and then stepping out of that comfort zone and then feeling empowered and then feeling disempowered. So what we have here is a new direction that is trying to emerge itself, Chiron in conjunct and the moon in conjunct Mercury. We're trying to change the narrative. We're trying to speak out. We're trying to say things differently. But that creates a sense of insecurity because we feel like what we're saying, what we're communicating is vulnerable, right? So we revert back to what we feel safe with. The Sun quincunx, the Uranus over here, says to us that what we're trying to break out of is, firstly, where we have internalized the needs of other people as if that was our own needs, and then try to meet those needs. This would be kind of collective codependency, right? We've all been entrenched in it. By the way, we were raised in a society, in a culture that advocates for that in a very unconscious way. And it will look like in your life as, let's say you say no, and somebody gets upset with you for that. You might feel guilty, and that guilt is really you not being able to feel that, well, feelings that you've hurt somebody else for recognizing your own need. And that guilt is the codependency, because it's wanting to soothe the other person's emotions because they themselves haven't been able to regulate their own emotions because they haven't been taught it. So generally speaking, when we say no or we choose ourselves over another person and that affects the other person, it can create an abandonment trauma, or it does. It creates an abandonment trauma in the other person, and their emotions will then show up to the surface because they don't feel seen, heard, or accepted, accepted. So there's this really, really bizarre complex that is trying to be resolving, that is showing up, and this is what we're trying to heal. Ultimately, is to separate ourselves from the dependency of the system and to individuate, to find your own way of being. And part of that process is healing the cracks of emotional displaced emotions around the lack of, you know, support, care, etc., that for most of us in a society we have experienced. So we need to become attached to the governmental structure, and they enforce it by being the parent, but nobody actually agreed to it completely. But when you do consent, you actually are agreeing to it, saying, hey, I don't want to take responsibility for my life. And it's scary to take responsibility for your life because it means that you're responsible for the things that happen to you in a large degree, right? So, and that's a big emotional thing to handle. So, of course, naturally speaking, if we take the emotional thing and we place it on something outside of ourselves, it's not in us. And then when it's not in us, we don't necessarily, well, we don't feel that dysregulation. So that's what's really also about with this astrology over here. It's showing us that, yes, we have experienced loss of power through betrayal by parents or loss of power. And that's natural, by the way. All of us will experience that. Parents are not perfect. And in every sense of the word, they try their best. And that's how it is, right? Because we are products of our collective stuff. So it's our job to heal that within ourselves. That's the key word here. And then, of course, the loss of power relating to authorities, loss of power relating to world governments that decide, okay, I'm going to make the decision for you, and if you don't listen, I'm just going to use force to bully you into submission, basically. And that's what this is about. This is what this whole entire chart is about: is the sensitivity and the trauma, and the wounding, and the dependency on structures that will enforce power. And if you disobey in some way or speak out in disobey, you'll be policed. And that's just how it is. This is the matrix, right? And Agent Smith will show up everywhere and anywhere to reinforce to you that you can't think independently for yourself. And that's what this Mercury quincunx your Chiron moon is about. It's the wound. It's when you think for yourself, when you speak up for yourself about things that can be easily contradicted, or it can be easily told by another person that that's wrong, that's right. And we just get into this whole thing where nobody's actually listening to each other in that sense, because everybody needs to feel safe within themselves to have their own ideologies reinforced. So we have cognitive bias that takes place. And that's what happens, right? So we just have groups of people that agree with each other because it makes them feel safe, and then other groups of people that disagree, but we can't disagree because that brings up all the emotions of evangelation and yada yada yada. And it's tiring to a big degree. We can't feel safe with other people to a large degree, because if you do in any way elicit a sense of disagreement, then it triggers a whole entire collapse of psychological and emotional structure. And yeah, there we are. We're in this kind of complex. And so the only way to heal yourself from this is to withdraw into yourself and begin to look at your own process and how you can reintegrate a healthier ego structure in that way, and to be able to come out and interact in a way that listens empathetically in that way. So we hear the other person's process. We're not trying to correct it. We're just trying to, okay, I see that you are, like, for instance, let me give you an example. And I know this is going to be a perfect example, but I have to do it. Okay, so currently at the moment, and I'm being very, very kind of vulnerable with this process, right? But I'm inviting conversation. Currently at the moment, there is a very strong movement by the Q or QAnon, okay? And when I notice people interacting with Q or QAnon believers, right, I see an incredible anger that comes out, right? It's like, oh, these people are believing in this. And while I sense, feel, and recognize the pain in the people that are saying these guys are crazy and they're nuts and they're causing all of these things and they believe all these things, like so let's break this apart, right? So you have person A, right, and person B. Okay. Yeah, this is an example of how this chart shows up, right? So, and this is what I mean about active listening. You don't have to do this. I'm just encouraging you to see that this energy over here shows us that we really, really have lost human connection. We're not in attunement in that sense. So here's a person that follows QAnon, okay? All right. And this person says, why do you do that? You are part of the problem. Okay. You're part of the problem. Now, here's the breakdown of the psychology that is associated with this. This person does not feel safe because this person is reinforcing to them their own disempowerment, okay, around an ideology or a perspective or a need that in some way, shape, or form does not, it reinforces their disempowerment, okay? That's a current people believe that this story with Trump, for instance, is doing it this way. Now, I have no facts. I have no idea whether this is true or not. In sense, I haven't even investigated it. But what I have observed is the social interaction where two people interact with it. Okay, so that's that. Then this person will say, yes, well, one of the reasons why I identify with this, not consciously, of course, is that I also am coming from a disempowered space because I'm also trying to control my reality. I need to control my reality because reality at the moment is completely bonkers. And my psychology and my framework of reality itself needs to become dependent on something that gives me a sense of hope. So really this person's saying, I'm looking for hope. And anything that represents hope, I'll attach to because that will give me a sense of this is going to end, or at least somebody's working on our side, aka childhood trauma. When something intense happens, is there somebody to protect me or stand up for me? You understand? All right. So that will show up from communication as here is a bunch of people who are fighting for good, right? What we do is we get caught up in this here and we don't see the other person. And because we don't see the other person, what we're actually doing is just interacting with the illusion here, as opposed to the actual recognition that, oh, it looks like you really, really are feeling scared at the moment because the world is really unstable. It sounds like you need a lot of hope. And this ideology or perspective gives unconsciously this sense. And if you are into Jung's work, you'll know that the shadow of a person's unresolved trauma can hook up to an external image that will then run the course or reveal to the person the unconscious attachment or unresolved trauma. Right. So what you're really seeing here is two people going, we're living in a really intense time right now. And my way of responding to reality is to say X. This person's way of responding to reality is to say Y. And our humanity is lost in this schism over here. And that's what this Neptune square the nodes is going to be about, right? And I'll talk about that in a different video. You understand? So this energy at the moment, right, is bringing to us the incomplete, like, it's ramping up. And to me, that's what October is. October is every single person being very aware of the fact that we are really, really affected by our traumas and we need to heal them or need to work on them. B, we need to start recognizing that a large part of our cognitive biases are protection mechanisms that we use in place, and we identify with those belief systems or truths because it gives us a sense of self. And B or C, the world is at this point in time going through an incredibly profound transmutation within itself. And that's a very scary thing. It's a very scary thing. It's not able to be controlled by each and every one of us. And in order for us to, at some point, stay safe, sane, we need to feel a sense of control. And so what we do is we project into that the ability to try and control it, because the other side of that is chaos. And it's a lot more difficult to live in chaos than it is to live in order relative to our mind and the way that we have lived up until this point in time. So what I'm advocating here is, look, the world is not going to change in the sense of things getting better. So you have to bring yourself to the place and to start looking at what it is what your world wants to look like and how you're going to paint and create the world that is real for you and is authentic for you in that sense. And you start by looking at yourself. You start by looking at what it is that brings you joy. You start looking at what it is that is supportive or healing to you, and you start giving more attention to that, and you shut out the noise of the information that triggers you, gaslights you, and reinforces the reality circus ultimately. Okay. All right, my friends, thanks very much for listening to this very intense video, and I look forward to seeing you in another video. Okay. All right, everybody, take care. Bye-bye.